Welcome back to Day Chats. This is part 2 of Encanto with Daisy and Alex. How much more of the movie can they spoil? What else will they discuss? Stay tuned to find out, because the show starts now.
And let me add another layer on top of that. And this is something that, again, as you all know by now, I love TikTok. I learned so much on TikTok, and it adds a lot of thought-provoking concepts in my head. So a few weeks back, I came across a video of this guy saying, our parents put all this trauma on us, right? There's no denying that. First generation, eldest children, just children in general in very traditional Latino families grow up with some kind of trauma. No denying that. And, that's often difficult for us to have to learn how to heal in families that don't support or are supportive of mental health practices, right? And so this guy talked about how, we have trauma. Let's not dismiss that. But just how we want to break certain cycles, our parents broke cycles for us too. And that just shattered my mind when I first heard it, because I started to think back and I'm like, I complain or I resent my parents for all these things that they made me go through. And when I bring up to them, they dismiss. And at the same time, they broke cycles for me too. My dad's dad was an alcoholic, and he was abusive physically, emotionally, mentally. And my dad broke some of those cycles. My dad doesn't drink because of that. My dad is, for the most part, pretty affectionate because his father wasn't, and my dad both my parents work really hard because my dad grew up in poverty. And, my grandma on my maternal grandmother, love her so much to death. But she just naturally wasn't very affectionate. And so my mom told me, I always thought my mom had this perfect childhood growing up for the most part. And not too long ago, she told me, my mom's always been the type of person to be I always joke around. I'm like, Mom, this thing happened. Let's go catch these hands with these people. Let's go. And she's always ready. She's no, let's go. No one's going to mess with my daughter. My mom will absolutely throw hands for me, anyone. And she doesn't hide that. And so my mom told me that, when she was little, her brother used to hit her all the time in front of her mom, and my grandma wouldn't do anything. Her brother would just beat her for no reason. And for that reason, she said, she thinks back and she's well, now that I have you, you're my daughter, I would never let anyone beat you for no reason. And so I question why my mom never did anything. And so at that point, I was so my mom broke that cycle. So she still passed on a lot of traumas that they had, same with my dad. But despite that, they still broke certain cycles. And so that's when I start to get conflicted with, a part of me is very big on fuck the grandma, fuck abuela, because of how she is. But at the same time, she also broke some cycles. She did what she had to do to protect her family, because they had to leave their home because people, which I could assume are colonizers, were coming after them. And abuelo sacrificed himself, gave the ultimate sacrifice to protect the kids. And abuela did everything she could to provide a home and a safe space for her whole family and her community and her village. And I think in one of the songs that even abuela says, who are we if we're not giving back, or something like that. And so that's when I start to get conflicted, because I'm very passionate on, we're not excusing it. But then I remember that through each generation, one way or another, we're breaking certain cycles.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Because, even as little as, because I know my grandma, she would, do, physical punishments to like my uncle and my mom, and like my grandpa would too. But my mom never laid a finger on me or my brother. Like, she was like, nope, that's not, like, I dealt with that with me. Like, I'm not passing that on at all. But, I mean, unfortunately, she did pass on, like, but, like, still the emotional unavailability. So, I mean, I guess it's just, but it's hard to overcome it. Like, you're just so used to something, like, and you want to do the best that you can. And I mean, like, me as a parent, like, I want to do the best that I can. And I know, like, I think it's inevitable that something that I don't know that I'm doing, that maybe Xochitl will realize when she's older. Like, you and your mom do this the same, but I'm not going to do that if she wants to have children. Like, no pressure, but like, if she wants to have children, like, I'm not going to do that to my children, you know?
Right.
So I think, like, it is very, like just overcoming, like, one thing, even though it might be, like, a small thing, like, just not hitting your kids if they're bad. Like, I feel like that could be a really big thing if that's exactly what you grew up learning and seeing and, like, just been surrounded with your whole life. And then, like, my mom didn't do it, and, like, I'm not doing it. And then, like, whatever else I find, well, I want to be emotionally available for my daughter. So I'm working on that. Like, you know, and then, like, maybe, like I said, like, you don't go down the list, but, like, I feel like eventually, like, for another one, a big thing that I pride myself on a lot is apologizing to her. Because sometimes I'm human, she's human. Like, sometimes I might overreact, or sometimes she might overreact to something, but, like, I always make sure, like, I say, like, if I'm in the wrong, like, I'm sorry that I did this to you. My mom never apologized to me. It was always my fault. So,
yeah,
like, I feel like that's another huge thing. It's like, you always feel it's like your fault. And I feel like maybe I over apologize on certain things. Like, I'm really sorry, like, you know, and to people, but I think that's an important thing to, like, to work on. And I know a lot of, like, our culture, we don't apologize. We're never wrong.
Not at all.
That's not a thing.
No.
I'm always right. Like,
especially, the children are expected to do some kind of mending, but the adults are never going to do that.
Yeah. And it's like, how is a 6-year-old going to mend me? Like,
exactly. Exactly.
Like, I'm not taking my life advice. Well, maybe some things.
That responsibility to apologize and fix the relationship falls on the child. Always, regardless of whether they're right or wrong, it falls on the child. And I think
that is shown through Mirabel, because she was blamed for cracking the whole house somehow. Like, she got her little hammer and, like, a little needle, and was just like, I'm gonna just make cracks all over the house, you know?
Yep. And even when the grandma came downstairs during Antonio's party, you know, she was quick to push her aside for embarrassing her in front of everyone. The concern wasn't, are you okay? What's going on? It was, what is going on right now that the house has to be perfect? And she was quick to turn around and brush her aside and say, the magic is strong. Because she didn't believe her. She was embarrassed. And right after that, what did they do? They took a picture with La Familia Madrigal, not including Mirabel. And that's when she sings, you know, that song about needing to fix herself and not being fine. She says, don't feel, I'm fine. And then she says, I'm not fine. How much, like, she said, I can't take another night in my room.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, and I think another, like, point to, like, make on that scene specifically is how right after, when Julieta takes her to the kitchen to make her, because she cut her hand, right? So to make her, like, even Julieta was like, I think tonight was just very emotional for you, you know? And I think, like, you know, that kind of shows the generational drama right there. Is like, you know what? This is where I got from my mom. Like, and I mean, she's not saying it as harsh as, like, the abuela took it, but she's still doing it.
Right.
I was being like, I like, bless his little heart, man. He's so for his daughter. Like, 110% of the time. And, like,
reminding her that she has nothing to prove to anyone. That happens like right before, like when she's starting to decorate and Abuela tells her to like mind her business, basically. He's like, remember, you are perfect as you are. You have nothing to prove to anyone.
And he's like, I get it. Like, I understand. Like, me and your tío Felix, we didn't have like these magical powers like everyone. And like, we felt really unexceptional, you know, how he said, like, and like, he just really wants his daughter to feel like as important as she is to the rest of the family, because she is important, and she is like a really big building block, because I mean, I think like more than anything, like too, I was gonna say también, like here I am mixed my English and Spanish. She that like it's like a huge, like, I feel like her having that hat or like not getting a gift, I feel like in some way it could have been a slap in the face to Abuela, like just to remind them, like, you guys aren't perfect. You're not all gonna get this. Like, I do whatever I want. Like this cat, I'm talking as the candle. Like, I'm the candle. Like, I decide, not you.
Right.
You know, you actually don't have any control over the situation. And so I feel like maybe that's another thing. Like, she just held that grudge. Like, oh, it was your fault that you didn't get a gift.
Right.
But there's also like this weird speculation about how like after Mirabel touched the candle when she was 5, she wipes her hands on her dress. Like, there was like this big point out, like that could have been like the candle's magic wiping away. But then also because when Antonio touched the candle, they like made it a point that he didn't wipe his hands on his clothes. So I wonder if that had something to do with it, but I don't know.
I don't know. I know I just watched a video the other day that talked about how everybody's attire matches up with their power. So, you know, the cousin that can hear things has like sound waves on her, and Antonio has like animals on his. And Maribel has a mixture of everything. She has flowers for Isabela. She has whatever the strength was for Luisa, and animals for like for everything. And so it's just, you know, an indication of her role is to be the glue for that family and to be the one to put everything back together. Because, you know, at the end of the day, like when the house was falling apart, the only person that the house was actually helping when she was trying to go for the candle was the house was helping Maribel. The house was kicking everybody else out, but the house was still helping Maribel get to the candle and protecting Maribel when the house crashed down eventually.
Yeah. I feel like her gift, like, was actually just to, like, put Abuela in her place. Like, that was exactly what she was born for. It was just like, I'll put you in your place right now.
Right.
I feel like that maybe been her. That was her gift. The strength to stand up to my Abuela.
Yeah, and she really did in her own way. And that's something, you know, when you were talking about the Maribel's dad's, you know, making a point that he also felt unexceptional. That's a point that my cousin son, we're going to call her that, made a point too. They were here earlier, her and my niece were here, and I actually recorded a little tidbit, you know, with what their thoughts were, because one of them is 6 and the other one is 10. So I thought it would be interesting to see what their points of view. Obviously, you and I are older. We're seeing past the Disney magic of it. And son is 10. So she, you know, is starting to understand a little bit more behind the message. Whereas, you know, Moon is 6. So she just sees the Disney magic. But I had, you know, I don't know if I should have told her this, but for the day that I watched it with her, I was like, Abuela's going to catch these hands. And we started talking about this. And should I have had that conversation with the 6-year-old and told her that grandma's going to catch these hands? I don't know, up for debate, but but we're going to have Andrew go ahead and insert that clip right here. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're not going to see much. You are just going to hear the audio just because they are children. So I don't want their faces out there. So we're going to take a little pause just to go ahead and put in their perspectives here. Okay, so we are here today with 2 very special little guests. We are here with Miss Moon and Miss Sun, and we are going to be talking about what their experiences and what their ideas were of the movie Encanto. So Sun, we'll go ahead and start with you, and let me just ask you, have you seen the movie Encanto?
Yes, I have seen the movie Encanto.
And what did that make you feel when you watched it?
Well, it was sort of mixed emotions. It sort of depended on the scene it was in.
What did you think the movie was about?
I think the movie was about just someone being different,
Mm-hmm.
and she kind of felt unexceptional, but in the end, she felt like she belonged in her own family, which she should.
And son, just so we can have a little bit of perspective, how old are you?
I am 10 years old.
Beautiful. So now before we move on to the next questions, I want to see the difference in perspective. So Miss Moon, how old are you?
6.
You're 6. So have you seen the Disney movie Encanto?
Yes.
Yes. And how did that movie make you feel when you watched it?
Emotional.
Emotional. What did it make you feel? Can you tell me some of the things that you felt?
A little bit happy.
A little bit happy and a little bit sad. Why did you feel a little bit happy?
Because at the end, everybody helped the people helped them build the house.
Mm-hmm. And why did you feel a little bit sad?
Because her went away.
She went away. Who
Yeah.
went away? Did you forget her name? Maribel?
Yeah.
Maribel? And what did you think the movie was about? When you watched it, what did you think that whole movie was showing? What was it teaching you?
Like powers, doors,
Mm-hmm.
that's it.
And what do you think about the grandma? This is something that I want to talk about with the both of you. Moon, I know that you and I have discussed some feelings about the grandma. You know, I feel a certain way about her. But what did you feel about the grandma when you were watching her? Do you think what she did was right? Do you think what she did was wrong? Do you feel like she did what she could as best as she could?
Her shirt was her best looking thing.
What?
Best.
She did her best as she could?
Yeah.
And how do you feel the grandma's reactions were like towards her grandchildren?
Emotional and happy.
Emotional and happy
And mad.
and mad? Do you feel like maybe sometimes she was a little bit mean to Maribel? Yeah. Do you feel like if your grandma was like that to you, you would feel sad?
No.
No? Oh, you're a strong one, huh? And we're going to come back to you. Miss Sun, can you go ahead and tell us how you felt about the grandma? What are your thoughts and feelings?
Well, at the beginning of the movie, I honestly thought that it was wrong that she treated Mirabel like that.
Mm-hmm. How did she treat her?
She, especially when Mirabel didn't get her gift,
Mm-hmm.
instead of comforting her and being like, it's okay, she just worried about the magic and the candle.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, she kind of had an excuse for this, like all the suffering that she had, and she just didn't want it to happen again.
And see, I think it's a really interesting point that you bring up about having that excuse of her treating her grandchildren that way. And I think that is a really important conversation to have is when is it okay, or at what point do we say, you know, what's an excuse for allowing someone to treat us a certain way versus having that just be an explanation, but not a reason to excuse the behavior, right? So going back to how Miss Moon was saying her actions, you know, sometimes was a little sad, right? A little bit mean sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know I've told you before, if I'm being honest, I told her that grandma was going to catch these hands.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I told her. Because I just wasn't happy with the way grandma was acting towards her grandchildren, right? With Maribel. And yeah, how did you feel? I know you were telling me that grandma had, you know, every right to act that way. You didn't agree with me and when I kept saying that grandma was mean. Can you tell me a little bit more why you did not agree with me?
It's because this like the grandma was like in the beginning the grandma was like her was trying to treat Maribel bad.
Mm-hmm.
But in the beginning her was helping Maribel feel good when her was gonna get her door.
That's very true. It seems like she had a good relationship with Maribel at first, huh? How do you think Maribel felt when grandma wasn't so nice to her anymore after she didn't get a gift?
Sad.
Sad. Do you think it made her feel like she was alone when grandma was hugging her sisters and being so proud of them, but not Maribel?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you think that would make you feel if that was you, if you were Maribel?
Sad.
That would make you sad. Do you feel that the grandma maybe didn't know how to accept that Maribel was different?
Yes.
Yeah. And if it was you, how do you feel you would have talked to the grandma? Do you feel like you would have told her something if you were Maribel?
Mm,
Or would you have just let her treat you?
When I was Maribel, I would just say to the grandma I was sad because she treated me.
And what would you tell her?
I'm gonna be sad because you treat me bad.
And how do you think you would try to come up with a solution to that? What would you tell her? What would make you feel better? Yeah. So if you were Maribel and you were telling grandma that it makes you sad that she's treating you this way, what would you feel would make you feel better? Hugging your grandma? You feel like that would make things better?
Yeah.
Having her give you that same attention, right?
Yeah.
Even though you're different?
Yeah.
And so, Miss Sun, do you feel that you would handle it the same way that Moon would do it and having that conversation with grandma, or would you handle it a little bit differently?
I would actually do it kind of the same way, but I would just actually ask for the excuse first because I feel like that's the most important thing.
And so how would you approach that?
I would ask her a question kind of like, why would you treat me different than the others?
Mm-hmm.
And then the conversation would just based on that.
And do you feel that's something that you practice in your own life today? When you feel that there's someone that's not treating you the same way, or you feel that, whether it's family or friends, do you feel like you stand up for yourself in that way?
In some situations.
Would you like to give an example of a situation where you feel that you were able to stand up for yourself in that way?
I cannot think of an example at this time.
That's okay. Miss Moon, do you feel like that's something that you would do today? If somebody was treating you bad, do you feel that you would tell that person, hey, I don't like how you're treating me. It's making me feel sad?
Yes.
You would? Have you ever had to do that before?
No.
No? That's good. But if someone did do that to you, what would you say to them? Even if it was like your mom or your dad. So how would you start that conversation?
Like, I would say, please stop being rude to me. Then I would treat you good.
That's good. And now let's talk, now that we're talking about, standing up for ourselves, and now we're starting to understand how Maribel felt that she was being pushed aside from grandma. How do you think Bruno felt when everybody saw the worst in him because of his power?
Sad?
Sad? You think he felt bad maybe?
Yeah. Bruno been sad because nobody wanted to spend time with him.
And it's almost like Bruno and Maribel were facing the same problems and the same issues, even though Bruno did have a special power, right? And so then we think about it, was the issue really that Maribel did not have a power, or was it that grandma was too focused on the actual miracles and what that meant for the family? Because remember, the whole town depended on their powers, right? But Bruno's power wasn't something that they thought was helpful because they thought it was only bad things that he saw, right? And Maribel didn't even have a power. So how could she contribute to the family, right? And the community. So when we're thinking about it like that, it seems like grandma was maybe a little too focused on the powers rather than her actual grandchildren, right? Yeah. And so now that we've had this little discussion, I would love to hear how you feel that movie now has maybe shifted your perspective, or maybe you feel that you view the movie a little bit differently, or do you feel that the movie still remains the same to you?
Maybe make me feel emotional.
A little more emotional? And how did it make you feel a little bit more emotional?
It been sad in the ending because it been sad in the middle part because nobody wanted to like spend time with Bruno because Bruno thought another kid would come with Maribel. Maribel was gonna get a door, but her didn't.
Right. Miss Sun, how do you feel that movie has changed after maybe having this discussion and, you know, thinking a little bit deeper beyond what the movie actually shows, which is the powers?
Basically, this movie hasn't really changed for me in my perspective because what I thought is what I said.
Right. That's great. I really appreciate getting that insight from both of you, Mia, Moon. I appreciate you showing us how that movie made you feel sad and how it made you feel happy. And I really like how you were able to show our viewers that even at the age of 6, you're able to see the messages that the movie is showing, right? That you're not just watching the characters move, that you're picking up a little bit on what it's teaching us, right? Especially with what Miss Sun said as well. You know, we want to make sure that we're picking up those messages that, you know, Miss Sun mentioned that the movie to her was about feeling not special and feeling different and feeling left out from our family. But, you know, at the end, there was a happy ending where Maribel was able to be with her family again and feel a part of her family. And I think it's an important discussion that we have. And I think it's important to start seeing where we start picking up these messages, right? Because as you guys will continue to listen, you know, when Alex and I discuss it more, you know, between us now being adults, these are the messages that we pick up from early ages of 6 to 10 to 25. And so I really appreciate you both ladies giving us your input. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope you guys enjoyed this little tidbit portion with our 2 lovely, lovely, lovely guests. Say bye.
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 And so there you have it, you know, perspective, you know, as you've all been listening, what our perspectives are and how we feel about this movie. And now the same perspective with Moon and Sun and how they see it. So just like Alex had said earlier, these are messages that we're picking up from a very early age. We're picking up these messages from birth, essentially. We're picking them up from a super young age. It's not something that they just happen to tell us as we get older. No, they make sure that we learn these behaviors, that we learn these implicit messages from the time that we are young.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's from a very early age. I didn't think you realize it until you're a little bit older, but it's definitely there. Like,
yeah.
When you look back at it now, you're like, oh yeah, I was told that. I was really little, like. And now I'm picking up on it, like that it's because of XYZ, but like I get it now.
Right.
But I always heard it, you know? And like, I mean, like when Sachi watches the movie, she like kind of like is everywhere with it. Like she loves the movie so much, but obviously they don't really get it.
Right.
And like they see the Disney magic of it. And that's why I love Disney in general. You know, they did this whole movie about generational trauma, but made it amazing for children
to watch it. And they're not even, they're, depending on their age, they're not even going to pick up on the actual messages. But I think that's where, you know, watching it back comes into play when, as they get older and having these conversations, you know, and letting them know, like, you know, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think the actual message of this movie is? Or how would you feel if this happened to you? And I feel like that's something that, you know, can help to get to the understanding, like an understanding of the deeper message behind the movie. Because this whole movie just had me like in tears. Every time I listen to Luisa's song, every time I watch this movie, like I'm holding back tears. Like I was watching the movie with my cousin and like my like tears had made I think you can probably see him right here, like because my makeup isn't waterproof, so like it would like take off the makeup as I was crying. And like she didn't understand why I was so emotional, and she's like, you know, both my niece was like, it's not even a sad movie. And I'm like, well, because, you know, it hurts because I resonate with this movie because this brings up so many emotions, so many memories, and so many feelings.
Yeah. And I think like another like kind of maybe sad, but also kind of great for representation kind of thing is that this is not a Mexican movie.
Oh, I know. I love that. And I actually learned like a little bit about their culture. I had no idea what arepas were before. I thought it was interesting that they wear very similar attire. Maribel's whole outfit is very similar to a lot of like the traditional Mexican women attire that they would wear, especially from like in like a rancho setting. So I thought that was so nice to have those similarities and for them to be able to have their own specific representation. Obviously, a lot of the generational trauma that comes is something that we can all resonate with. But for them, Colombians, to have their own song also about loving Colombia, I thought that was so beautiful.
Yeah, and I think just go Disney in general. Because remember when I was like talking about how like my siblings were like, no, like, it doesn't have a point like Coco, but I think for me it was like, why does it have to have a point in order to show colored people on screen?
Exactly. Like, to see Felix and, you know, and to see his children be of a darker skin tone, to just show the variety of melanin that Colombians can have. Like we had a range from being super light skinned to being tan, like Maribel and Isabela, who's a little bit darker, and then her cousins who are even more darker in complexion. I thought that was just such a beautiful way to represent the diversity that Colombia has in itself.
Yeah, and I think not even just like, I mean, I know it is specifically Colombia, but I think just in general, like, because there is such great diversity throughout like every Latino country. Like it's just so big. And I think another thing that I really love about this movie is that like I do like Coco, but I think for this movie specifically, everyone stayed human. Yes. And I think that's really important because it shows brown people all through the entire movie as a human. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Coco, I mean, yeah, we do love like being like in the Day of the Dead, like, you know, putting like the calaveras on our face, like painting it, you know. But we weren't human the whole movie. We were half dead the entire movie. And
full dead. Full dead.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, full dead. You're right. But like, there's like that part, you know, when they're crossing. No,
yeah.
Okay, wait. But I think and I think it's like really important that they showed like Afro-Latino people, because even in Soul and Princess and the Frog, African Americans, like when they show, they're not human the entire movie.
No, in Soul, that's so true.
Mostly a cat, and then in Princess and the Frog, she's a frog, and so is the prince. So mm-hmm. It's like, why do we have to show people of color as animals or dead? But I feel like not dead like in a condescending way, because like that's our culture. Like I love that. Like I love embracing like our family that have moved on into another life. But why can't I be human an entire movie?
Right. Like, why couldn't there have been portions where they discussed that in a human form? Right.
Yeah.
I think that would have been good. But to be fair, the whole point of the movie was to show, for Coco, was to show the, you know, Dia de los Muertos and what it's like, the importance of setting out all those things out for our family members. So I understand, but I do get that point. Like, it would have been nice to see that representation of our, specifically you and I, Alex, our Mexican culture in human form, because Mexico is such a beautiful land and does such beautiful things in our culture. And it would have been nice to at least include some of that in human form, which they did a little bit at the end. But it would be nice to have more representation all around. But I think this movie, Encanto, was a great start, you know, like you said.
That was like my point. Like, why does there have to be a point made in order to have like people of color on TV?
Which
like,
doesn't even make sense, because this whole episode is about the point of the movie. We're not criticizing the movie. The movie's amazing. We're criticizing our own culture and how that movie did such a great job to exemplify the real struggles that we face in our shared traditions. Because we're not Colombian, but we face the same generational traumas that Colombians may have experienced. You know, every region will have their own their differences in a way, but we all Latinos share that same generational trauma, same lack of emotional availability, and that same, you know, pressure that we have being the eldest, or being the first generations, or being the only ones that are actually moving up in their family, and face those criticisms for moving up. You know, like at least for me, like, I always feel that pressure of having to make my parents' sacrifices worth it. And not only having it make it worth it, but making it seem on the outside that I'm doing something worthwhile.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because why can't I just be myself and do the things that I want to do that make me happy and make me proud of being me? Mm-hmm. Why does it have to be in honor or have like some like deeper meaning? Like, I don't know, like, it's just like, you should just be proud of me for wanting to be the person that I was born to be. Like, why do you want to change your family members so badly sometimes? Like, that's who they are. Exactly.
Like, we should, when it comes to that, like that's when we should start implementing those family values. That is our family. If they're good people, they're not hurting anyone. Like that song that Maná sings, Me Vale, like, ¿qué te importa? No le hago daño a nadie. Like, what do you care what I'm doing? I'm not hurting anyone. Yeah. You know? And that's, unfortunately, in our community, is that is the time where a family isn't so bonded. They're bonded to criticize, but not bonded to accept.
And I think another thing to be said about that is, like, we still love them. Mm-hmm. Like, we will still go to the ends of the earth for each and every one of them, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll go, you know, and forgive them, and we'll make excuses for them, and we'll give them passes because, like you said, at the end of the day, we love them. They're a family, and we have been taught that no matter what, our family is the only thing that we'll ever have. Your friends will go away. You'll make new friends. They'll leave you, but your family never will. And those are the messages that we're taught. And that is something that I am trying so hard to unlearn, because it is true. Your friends come and go, but so does family.
Yeah, that's true, actually, you know, because unfortunately, like, I think that was another, like, a hard thing, like, growing up and learning, is that, like, yeah, they're your family, but you don't have to like them.
Exactly.
You don't see them.
Exactly. And I think that's where it comes down to, like, dealing with those toxic family members, and, like, knowing how to, first of all, acknowledge and recognize them, and then be strong enough to stand up to them, which, you know, I think is something that is definitely so important that we should be able to discuss. But I think we'll go ahead and leave that up for a little cliffhanger, and we'll go ahead and do that on a part 2. So if you guys are interested in learning about toxic family members and how we deal with them, how we cope with them, the reality of growing up with toxic family members, and again, just going on more with that generational trauma. I know we tapped into it very lightly, and you know, I'll put in a little explanation at the very beginning about what generational trauma is. But if you want to learn more about toxic relationships and friendships and family members specifically, stay tuned for next week. We're going to go ahead and do this in a part 2. Alex, thank you so much for having this discussion with me about Encanto and just sharing your wisdom. I think has been such a nice episode. That way people can actually have a safe space in a way to share what their feelings are. If you agree or disagree, that's totally fine. Let us know. Give us our feedback. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you for having me. I did have fun. I want, obviously, I love hearing other people's experiences. I mean, everyone has it differently. As a first generation or like me, third generation, there's always something in some family, and I think it's very beautiful. And I think all of our Latino cultures are very beautiful and bright.
Yes, agreed. So we'll go ahead and end this episode here. So stay tuned for the next one. Until next time, embrace the day. Bye.